The smell of overpriced wine and my mother-in-law's condescension filled the air as I adjusted my tie for the third time. Martha Blackwood's dining room looked like something out of a museum, all crystal chandeliers and imported marble that screamed old money louder than a fire alarm. Too bad most of it was fake, just like everything else in this family. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Richard, dear, do try to sit up straight, Martha said, her voice dripping with the kind of politeness that could cut glass. We have a special guest tonight. I glanced at my wife Erica, who was fidgeting with her phone like a teenager. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that severe bun she wore when she was nervous, and her green eyes kept darting toward the door. After 15 years of marriage, I knew her tells better than she knew them herself. Who's the mystery guest? I asked, taking a sip of wine that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Before Martha could answer, the doorbell rang with one of those pretentious Westminster chimes. Clarence, my father-in-law, straightened his silk tie and headed for the door with the kind of swagger that only comes from inherited wealth, even when that wealth is mostly smoke and mirrors. That would be Dr. Brandon Cates, Martha announced, practically purring. He's the head of cardiovascular surgery at Mercy General. Such an accomplished young man. Erica's phone slipped from her hands and clattered onto her plate. The sound echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. Butterfingers, I said, handing it back to her. Her hands were shaking. Interesting. Dr. Brandon Cates swept into the room like he owned it, all silver hair and $1,000 suit. He was the kind of handsome that came with a personal trainer and a dermatologist on speed dial. Mid-30s, perfectly sculpted jawline, and the kind of smile that made middle-aged women forget they were married. Mrs. Blackwood, thank you so much for inviting me, he said, taking Martha's hand and actually kissing it. The old bat practically swooned. Dr. Cates, I'd like you to meet my daughter Erica and her husband Richard, Martha said, emphasizing husband like it was a disease. Please call me Brandon, he said, shaking Erica's hand a little too long. Erica's told me so much about you, Richard. You're in construction, right? The way he said construction made it sound like I spent my days picking up trash on the highway. I smiled and shook his perfectly manicured hand, noting how his grip was just a little too firm, the handshake of a man trying to prove something. Something like that, I replied. As we settled around the table, I watched the dynamics play out like a chess match. Brandon sat directly across from Erica, their eyes meeting every few seconds. Martha hung on his every word like he was reciting scripture. Clarence nodded approvingly at everything the good doctor said. And Erica, my wife of 15 years, mother of my daughter, couldn't stop blushing like a schoolgirl. So, Richard, Brandon said, cutting into his perfectly prepared filet mignon, Erica mentioned you do some kind of contracting work? Some kind, I agreed, taking another bite. Must be challenging in this economy, he continued. I imagine it's hard to find steady work. Martha jumped in like she'd been waiting for this opening. Oh, Richard's always struggling with one project or another. We keep telling Erica she deserves better, don't we, Clarence? Clarence grunted his agreement around a mouthful of wine. I felt that familiar burn in my chest, the one that came whenever these people treated me like the help. But tonight felt different. Tonight, watching my wife practically undress this pompous surgeon with her eyes, the burn felt more like rage. Actually, I said, setting down my fork, business has been pretty good lately. Oh? Brandon raised an eyebrow. What kind of projects are you working on? I could see Erica tensing up beside me. She knew what was coming, and she was terrified. Well, last month I sold my little construction company to Meridian Tech for $12 million. The silence that followed was beautiful. Martha's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Clarence choked on his wine, Brandon's perfect smile faltered for just a moment. 12 million? Martha whispered. After taxes, of course. The company I started in our garage 5 years ago developed a proprietary software system for construction project management. Turns out, big tech companies pay handsomely for that kind of innovation. I pulled out my phone and showed them the press release from TechCrunch. Made the trade publications last week. Local construction firm acquired in multi-million-dollar deal. I'm surprised Erica didn't mention it. All eyes turned to my wife, whose face had gone completely white. She opened her mouth, then closed it, looking like a fish gasping for air. I didn't think, she stammered. Didn't think it was worth mentioning? I asked gently. That your husband just became one of the wealthiest men in the county? Brandon was staring at me like I'd just grown a second head. The cocky surgeon who'd walked in here ready to show up the blue-collar husband was now face to face with someone who probably made more in a month than he did in a year. Well, Martha said, her voice barely above a whisper. That's wonderful news, Richard. Isn't it? I smiled and raised my glass. To new beginnings. Nobody else raised their glass. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence, punctuated only by the occasional clink of silverware and Brandon's increasingly desperate attempts at conversation. He name-dropped medical conferences and expensive restaurants, but the magic was gone. The dynamic had shifted, and everyone at the table knew it. When Brandon finally excused himself, claiming an early surgery in the morning, I noticed how his goodbye to Erica lingered just a moment too long. I'll see you at work tomorrow, he said, his voice soft enough that only she could hear it. But I heard it too. After he left, Martha and Clarence made their own excuses and disappeared upstairs, leaving Erica and me alone in the dining room. She sat there staring at her untouched dessert, her hands folded in her lap like a scolded child. $12 million, Richard? She said finally. You never told me the exact amount. You never asked. You were always too busy with your late shifts at the hospital. She looked up sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all. Just an observation. I stood up and walked around the table, stopping behind her chair. In the reflection of the china cabinet's glass doors, I could see her face, guilt written across it in permanent marker. He seems nice, I said casually. Dr. Cates, very attentive. He's a colleague, Richard. Nothing more. Of course. Just like all those late nights at the hospital are about work. She spun around in her chair to face me. Are you accusing me of something? I looked down at my wife, this woman I'd loved, supported and built a life with, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger anymore. Something much more dangerous. I'm not accusing you of anything, Erica. I'm just saying that Dr. Cates seems very interested in you, and you seem very interested in him. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because from where I was sitting, it looked like you two were having your own private conversation all evening. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back. I don't have to listen to this paranoid nonsense. I'm going home. Good idea. I'll be along shortly. I want to help Martha with the dishes. As she stormed out, I pulled out my phone and opened the Find My Friends app we'd set up years ago for safety reasons. The little dot that represented Erica's phone was moving away from the Blackwood mansion, but it wasn't heading toward our house. It was heading toward the hospital, at 11:30 at night. I smiled and started clearing the table. This was going to be interesting. The parking garage at Mercy General Hospital looked like something out of a noir film at midnight, all harsh fluorescent lighting and deep shadows that could hide a multitude of sins. I sat in my truck on the 3rd level, watching the little dot on my phone that represented my wife's location. She'd been here for 20 minutes now, and her car was parked 2 levels down next to a silver BMW that definitely wasn't in the hospital's fleet vehicle program. My phone buzzed with a text from Erica. Working late again? Don't wait up. Working late. Right. I'd been married to this woman for 15 years. I knew the difference between her "I'm actually working" face and her "I'm lying through my teeth" face. Tonight at dinner, she'd been wearing the latter like a neon sign. The elevator dinged, and I ducked down as two figures emerged. Even from 3 levels up, I could recognize Erica's silhouette and the tall, silver-haired man walking beside her, Dr. Brandon Cates, still in his expensive suit, his hand resting on the small of my wife's back in a gesture that was anything but professional. They stopped beside the BMW, and what happened next confirmed every suspicion I'd been harboring for the past 6 months. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she'd started dressing differently. It all made sense now. Brandon pressed her against the car and kissed her like they were teenagers at prom, not a friendly peck between colleagues. This was the kind of kiss that came with tongue and wandering hands, and the kind of passion that had been missing from my marriage for years. I pulled out my phone and started recording. They broke apart, and I could see them talking animatedly. Erica was gesturing wildly, clearly upset about something. Brandon was trying to calm her down, his hands on her shoulders. Then she pulled out her phone and showed him something that made his face go pale. They talked for another 5 minutes before getting into their respective cars and driving off in opposite directions. Erica's dot on my phone started moving toward home. I waited 10 minutes before following, my mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Was it just physical, or was there more to it? And what had she shown him on her phone that had made him look like he'd seen a ghost? When I got home, Erica's car was already in the driveway. I found her in the kitchen, still in her work clothes, making herself a cup of tea, with hands that were visibly shaking. "How was work?" I asked casually. She jumped like I'd fired a gun. "Jesus, Richard, you scared me." "Sorry. Long night at the hospital?" "Yes, very long. Emergency surgery." She couldn't meet my eyes. "Dr. Cates must be exhausted. All those late-night emergencies you two have been handling lately." The teacup slipped from her hands and shattered on the kitchen floor. Hot tea splashed everywhere, and Erica just stood there staring at the mess like she'd forgotten how to move. "I'll get the broom," I said. As I cleaned up the broken ceramic, I watched my wife's reflection in the window above the sink. She looked terrified, and that scared me more than the affair itself. Erica wasn't the type to fall apart over getting caught cheating. She was calculating, controlled, always 3 steps ahead. If she was this rattled, there was something bigger going on. "Richard," she said suddenly, "we need to talk." I looked up from the dustpan full of broken china. "About what?" "About us. About our marriage. I think we might need some time apart." There it was, the conversation I'd been expecting for months, delivered with all the warmth of a medical diagnosis. "Time apart," I repeated. "As in separation?" "Maybe. I don't know. I just feel like we've grown apart, and maybe some space would help us figure things out." I dumped the broken teacup in the trash and turned to face her. "This wouldn't have anything to do with your colleague Dr. Cates, would it?" Her face went through about 6 different expressions in the span of 2 seconds. "What?" "No. Richard, that's... Because I have to say, he seemed very interested in you tonight at dinner. Very attentive. He's just a friend. The kind of friend you meet in hospital parking garages at midnight?" The color drained from her face completely. For a moment, I thought she might actually faint. "I don't know what you think you saw." I saw my wife kissing another man. I saw her lying to my face about working late. I saw 15 years of marriage going down the drain for some silver-haired surgeon with a god complex. She opened her mouth to deny it, but I held up my hand. "Don't. Please don't insult my intelligence by lying anymore. I know about the affair, Erica. What I don't know is why you look like you're about to have a panic attack." She sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her hands covering her face. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. But they didn't look like tears of guilt or remorse. They looked like tears of fear. It's complicated, Richard. Adultery usually is. No, you don't understand. It's not just about Brandon and me. There are other people involved, people who could make things very difficult for you if they wanted to. A chill ran down my spine. What kind of people? She shook her head. I can't tell you that. But Richard, I need you to know that whatever happens, I never meant for you to get hurt. You're a good man, and you deserve better than this. Better than what exactly? Because right now, all I know is that my wife is cheating on me with some hotshot surgeon. If there's more to the story, now would be a good time to share. She stood up abruptly. I can't. I'm sorry, but I just can't. I'll be staying at my mother's for a few days while we figure this out. Running away isn't going to solve anything, Erica. I'm not running away. I'm trying to protect you. From what? But she was already heading upstairs to pack a bag, leaving me alone in the kitchen with more questions than answers and a growing certainty that my problems were just getting started. I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway before going upstairs to our bedroom. If Erica thought she was protecting me by keeping secrets, she was about to learn that I wasn't the same naive contractor she'd married 15 years ago. Building a multi-million-dollar business had taught me a few things about investigation and information gathering. Her laptop was still on the dresser, password protected but not encrypted. It took me about 10 minutes to crack her password, our daughter's birthday combined with her maiden name. Not very creative for someone trying to hide an affair. What I found in her email and text messages made my blood run cold. The affair with Brandon was just the tip of the iceberg. There were messages from Erica's best friend Fiona, who worked in hospital administration. Messages about my erratic behavior and concerning mood swings. Messages about having me evaluated for my own safety and the safety of others. Messages about having me committed. And in the most recent exchange, sent just hours before dinner at the Blackwoods, was a plan that made my hands shake with rage. Fiona. The paperwork is ready. We just need one more incident to establish a pattern. Erica. What kind of incident? Fiona. Public breakdown, threatening behavior, something the hospital board can't ignore. Erica. I don't know if I can do this to him. Fiona. Think about the money, Erica. $12 million. You could disappear with Brandon and never worry about anything again. Erica. But if Richard finds out? Fiona. He won't. Once he's committed, his business assets become your responsibility as next of kin. By the time he gets out, if he gets out, you and Brandon will be long gone. I read the exchange 3 times, my hands shaking with a combination of rage and disbelief. My wife, the woman I'd loved, supported, and trusted for 15 years, was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could steal my money and run off with her surgeon boyfriend. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. I spent the next 2 hours going through every email, every text message, every document on Erica's laptop. By the time I was finished, I had a complete picture of their plan and more than enough evidence to destroy all 3 of them. But I wasn't going to rush into anything. If 15 years in business had taught me anything, it was that the best revenge was served cold, calculated, and absolutely devastating. I closed the laptop and smiled for the first time in hours. Game on. The Ledger was the kind of dive bar where construction workers, hospital staff, and various other working-class folks came to drink away their problems. It smelled like stale beer and broken dreams, but the drinks were strong, and the bartender, Janine, had a talent for keeping her mouth shut when it mattered. I'd been coming here for years, back when I was just another contractor trying to make ends meet. Now, sitting at my usual spot at the end of the bar, I was technically one of the wealthiest men in the county. Funny how money didn't make the beer taste any better. You look like someone ran over your dog, Janine said, sliding another beer across the scarred wooden bar. She was in her 50s, with graying hair and the kind of no-nonsense attitude that came from years of dealing with drunk customers and broken hearts. Worse, I said, someone's trying to steal my life. Tony Ricci, my former project foreman and current friend, looked up from his whiskey. Tony was built like a brick wall and had the kind of street smarts that came from growing up in the rough part of town. He'd been with me since the early days of the construction company, and I trusted him more than my own family. "What kind of trouble we talking about here, Rich?" Tony asked. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screenshots I'd taken of Erica's messages. Watching their faces change from confusion to anger to outright rage was almost therapeutic. "That scheming bitch," Janine muttered, which was about as close to profanity as she ever got. 15 years of marriage, and this is how she repays you? "It gets worse," I said, scrolling to the messages about the commitment plan. "They want to have me declared mentally incompetent so they can take everything and disappear." Tony's hands clenched into fists. "You want me to have a conversation with this doctor? The kind of conversation that happens in a dark alley? No violence, Tony. That's exactly what they're expecting. They want me to lose control, do something stupid that they can use against me. We're going to be smarter than that." "So what's the plan?" Janine asked. I took a long drink of beer and smiled. "We're going to give them exactly what they want, and then we're going to destroy them with it." Over the next hour, I laid out my strategy. It was risky, required perfect timing, and depended on several people underestimating my intelligence. In other words, it was exactly the kind of plan that had made me $12 million. The first phase started the next morning at Mercy General Hospital. I'd never been to Erica's workplace before. She'd always said it would be unprofessional for family members to visit during work hours. Now I understood why. The place was crawling with people who knew about her affair, and walking through those halls felt like being the only person not in on a joke. I found Erica in the HR department, sitting behind her desk looking like she hadn't slept in days. When she saw me walk in, her face went through the now familiar cycle of emotions: surprise, guilt, fear, and finally resignation. "Richard, what are you doing here?" "I came to apologize," I said loudly enough for her co-workers to hear. "About last night. I know I've been acting strange lately, and I wanted to make sure you knew it wasn't your fault." She blinked in confusion. This clearly wasn't what she'd been expecting. "Acting strange?" she repeated. "The paranoia, the accusations about you and Dr. Cates. I know how ridiculous that must have sounded. A woman like you interested in some surgeon? What was I thinking?" I could see her trying to process this unexpected turn. Behind her, I noticed Fiona pretending to work, while obviously listening to every word. "Richard, maybe we should talk about this at home." "No, I need to say this now, while I have the courage." I ran my hands through my hair and tried to look as unstable as possible. "I've been having these thoughts lately, dark thoughts. Sometimes I can't tell what's real and what's just in my head." Fiona's ears practically perked up. This was exactly what they'd been waiting for. "Maybe you should see someone," Erica said carefully. "A professional." "You think I'm crazy too, don't you?" I raised my voice just enough to draw attention from the other offices. "My own wife thinks I'm losing my mind." "Richard, please keep your voice down." "Why? Because you're embarrassed by me? Because I'm not good enough for your fancy hospital friends?" I knocked over a cup of pens on her desk, sending them scattering across the floor. The sound echoed through the office like gunshots. "Security?" someone whispered behind me. "Perfect." "I'm sorry," I said, suddenly deflating. "I'm so sorry, Erica. I don't know what's wrong with me lately. Maybe you're right about needing some time apart." 2 security guards appeared in the doorway, but Erica waved them off. "It's okay," she told them. "He's leaving." I nodded and started toward the door, then turned back one more time. "Erica, if something happens to me, if I do something stupid, just remember that I love you, that I've always loved you." The look of guilt that flashed across her face was almost worth the performance. As I walked out of the hospital, I could practically hear the wheels turning in Fiona's head. They had their incident. Now they just needed to document it and wait for the next one. Phase 2 began that evening. I was sitting in my truck outside Brandon's expensive condo complex when he pulled up in his BMW. He parked in his assigned spot and was walking toward the building entrance when I got out and called his name. "Dr. Cates, Brandon." He turned around, and I could see the exact moment he recognized me. His confident stride faltered, and his hand moved instinctively toward his phone. "Richard," he said carefully, "what are you doing here?" "I wanted to thank you," I said, walking toward him with what I hoped looked like genuine gratitude. "Thank me?" "For being such a good friend to Erica during this difficult time. She told me how supportive you've been." He relaxed slightly, probably thinking I was just another clueless husband who didn't know his wife was cheating. "Erica's a wonderful woman," he said. "She deserves all the support she can get." "She does. And I'm glad she has someone like you looking out for her. Someone who understands what she's going through with a husband who's—" I gestured vaguely at myself. "Well, you know." "I'm not sure I follow." "The mental health issues, the paranoia, the mood swings. It can't be easy for her, working with someone like you, so successful, so stable, while dealing with a husband who's falling apart." Brandon's eyes sharpened. He was clearly trying to figure out if I was fishing for information or genuinely oblivious. "Has Erica talked to you about getting help?" he asked. "She's mentioned it. Some kind of evaluation, maybe some time in a facility where I can get the help I need." I laughed bitterly. Honestly, it might be for the best. At least then she could move on with her life, find someone who deserves her. "Richard, I don't think— someone like you, maybe. I mean, if I wasn't in the picture." The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Brandon was clearly trying to decide if this was some kind of trap or if I was really just a broken man having a breakdown. "I should go," he said finally. "Of course. I'm sorry for bothering you. I needed to know that someone was looking out for her. Someone who could give her the life she deserves." As he walked away, I called out one more time. "Brandon, take care of her for me, okay? When I'm gone, take care of her." He paused at the building entrance, looked back at me with something that might have been pity, then disappeared inside. I sat in my truck for another 10 minutes, making sure he saw me through his window. Just a broken man, sitting alone in a parking lot, staring at nothing. Then I drove home and started preparing for Phase 3. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. Erica and her co-conspirators expected me to fight the commitment proceedings, to hire lawyers and make a scene. Instead, I was going to let them win, right up until the moment I destroyed them all. But first, I had some financial arrangements to make. The charity gala at the Riverside Convention Center was the kind of event where the city's elite came to see and be seen while pretending to care about worthy causes. Tonight's beneficiary was the Children's Hospital Foundation, which made it the perfect venue for Dr. Brandon Cates to make his grand entrance as the hospital's golden boy. I hadn't planned to attend, but when the invitation arrived addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Richard Forrest, I realized it was too good an opportunity to pass up, especially since the invitation had been sent before news of my business sale had become public knowledge. I arrived alone, wearing my best suit and carrying myself with the kind of confidence that $12 million could buy. The looks I got from the other attendees ranged from confusion to curiosity. Most of them remembered me as Erica's blue-collar husband, who used to skip these events to avoid embarrassment. "Richard Forrest?" A woman in an expensive evening gown approached me near the bar. "I'm Patricia Hawthorne from the hospital board. I heard about your recent business success. Congratulations." "Thank you. I'm sorry my wife couldn't be here tonight. She's been dealing with some personal issues lately." Patricia's expression shifted to one of concern. "Oh, I hope everything's all right." "We're working through it. You know how it is. Sometimes success changes people, and not always for the better." Before she could ask what I meant, I excused myself and made my way through the crowd. I could see Erica across the room, stunning in a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before. She was standing with Fiona and several other hospital administrators, laughing at something one of them had said. She hadn't seen me yet, but Fiona had. The expression on her face when she spotted me was priceless. Pure panic mixed with calculation. She whispered something to Erica, who turned around and nearly dropped her wine glass. Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and I raised my own glass in a silent toast. The look of fear that crossed her face told me everything I needed to know about how my recent breakdown performances had been received. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced from the stage, "please welcome Dr. Brandon Cates, who will be speaking about the hospital's new cardiac wing." Brandon took the stage to polite applause, looking every inch the distinguished surgeon in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. As he began his speech about saving lives and serving the community, I noticed how his eyes kept drifting to Erica in the audience. "The work we do at Mercy General isn't just about medicine," he was saying. "It's about trust. Patients trust us with their lives, their families trust us with their loved ones, and the community trusts us to maintain the highest standards of professional and personal conduct." The irony was almost too much to bear. I waited until he was halfway through his speech before making my move. Walking slowly toward the stage, I began clapping loudly, not the polite golf clap of the other attendees, but the kind of enthusiastic applause you'd hear at a baseball game. "Wonderful," I called out. "Absolutely wonderful." Brandon paused, squinting into the lights to see who was interrupting his moment. The audience turned to look at me, and I could see Erica trying to shrink into the floor. "I'm sorry," Brandon said into the microphone, "but I'm in the middle of—" "Please don't let me interrupt," I said, still clapping. "I just wanted to thank you publicly for all the personal attention you've been giving my wife. Your bedside manner is truly exceptional." The crowd murmured with confusion. Brandon's face went pale, and I could see security guards starting to move in my direction. "Sir, I think there's been some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding at all, doctor. I know exactly what kind of man you are. The kind who takes advantage of vulnerable women whose husbands are having mental health crises." The murmur turned into gasps. Someone behind me whispered, "Is that Erica Forrest's husband?" "Sir, you need to leave," one of the security guards said, reaching for my arm. I shrugged him off and continued addressing Brandon, who looked like he wanted to disappear. "But don't worry, doctor, I won't be a problem much longer. My wife and her friend Fiona have made sure of that. Haven't you, dear?" I turned to look directly at Erica, who was now surrounded by curious onlookers. Her face was a mask of horror and embarrassment. "They've got it all figured out," I continued. "The commitment papers, the asset transfers, the whole plan. Very thorough, very professional. I have to admire the attention to detail." "That's enough," the security guard said, grabbing my arm more firmly. "You're right," I agreed. "I've said what I came to say." As they escorted me toward the exit, I called back over my shoulder. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. And doctor, take good care of my wife. She's going to need all the support she can get." The ballroom erupted in whispered conversations as the doors closed behind me. I could only imagine what Erica and Brandon were dealing with inside. The questions, the stares, the sudden realization that their secret was no longer secret. Phase 4 was complete. I drove to the ledger, where Tony and Janine were waiting for me with drinks and expectant expressions. "How'd it go?" Tony asked. "Better than expected. By tomorrow morning, half the city will know that Dr. Brandon Cates is having an affair with a married woman whose husband is having a mental breakdown." "And the other half?" Janine asked. "We'll know by tomorrow afternoon." I raised my beer. To the power of public humiliation. We drank to that, and then I filled them in on the next phase of the plan. By the time I was finished, both of them were grinning like sharks who'd smelled blood in the water. You're one devious son of a bitch, Tony said admiringly. I learned from the best. 15 years of marriage to a woman who could scheme her way out of a locked room will teach you a few things about strategy. My phone buzzed with a text from Erica. We need to talk. Now. I showed the message to Tony and Janine. You going to answer? Janine asked. Eventually. But first, I have some calls to make. I spent the next hour on the phone with my lawyer, my accountant, and several business contacts. By the time I was finished, the financial trap was set. Erica and her conspirators thought they were going to steal my money, but they were about to learn that I'd been 3 steps ahead of them from the beginning. The $12 million from the business sale was already protected in a trust that couldn't be touched even if I was declared incompetent. My other assets had been quietly transferred to offshore accounts that didn't exist on any paperwork Fiona could access. And the construction projects that were still generating income had been restructured through a series of shell companies that would take a team of forensic accountants months to unravel. If they wanted to play games with my mental health, they were welcome to try. But they weren't getting a penny of my money. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call, not a text. Hello, Erica. Richard, what the hell was that tonight? You humiliated me in front of everyone I work with. I was just being honest about our situation. Isn't honesty important in a marriage? You made it sound like I was having an affair. Aren't you? The silence stretched for so long, I thought she might have hung up. Richard, you're sick. You need help. I know. That's why I've decided to check myself into a facility. Get the treatment I need. Another long silence. What? I've been thinking about what you said, about needing professional help. You're right. I can't go on like this, seeing conspiracies everywhere, imagining that my wife is cheating on me with her colleague. It's not fair to you. I don't understand. I'm going to sign myself in for evaluation tomorrow morning. Voluntary commitment. That way you won't have to go through the legal process. I could practically hear her brain trying to process this unexpected development. Richard, you don't have to do anything drastic. Yes, I do. For both our sakes. And Erica, I want you to know that whatever happens, I forgive you. For everything. I hung up before she could respond, then turned off my phone. Think she bought it? Tony asked. Hook, line, and sinker. By tomorrow night, they'll think they've won. And then? I smiled and finished my beer. Then the real fun begins. The Willowbrook Mental Health Facility looked exactly like what it was, a place where wealthy families sent their inconvenient relatives to be quietly forgotten. The grounds were manicured, the buildings were tastefully designed, and the staff spoke in the kind of hushed, professional tones that cost extra. I checked myself in on a Tuesday morning, carrying a single suitcase and wearing the expression of a man who'd finally accepted his fate. The intake process was thorough, but polite. Blood tests, psychological evaluations, and enough paperwork to choke a horse. Mr. Forrest, said Dr. Sarah Chen, the psychiatrist assigned to my case, I want you to know that voluntary commitment shows tremendous courage. Many people in your situation would resist getting help. My situation? The paranoid episodes, the accusations against your wife, the public outbursts. Your wife and her colleague were very thorough in documenting your recent behavior. I nodded sadly. I know how it must look. But sometimes, when you're in the middle of a breakdown, everything seems so real. The conspiracy theories, the belief that people are plotting against you. It's terrifying. Dr. Chen made notes on her tablet. Have you been experiencing any other symptoms? Hallucinations, voices, periods of lost time? Sometimes I find myself in places with no memory of how I got there. Last week, I discovered I'd driven to my wife's workplace in the middle of the night. I don't remember making the decision to go there. More notes. This was going exactly as I'd hoped. We're going to start you on a mild antipsychotic medication, she said. It should help with the paranoid thoughts while we work on identifying the underlying causes of your condition. Whatever you think is best, doctor. I just want to get better. The medication was easy enough to palm and flush down the toilet when nobody was looking. The real challenge was maintaining the performance 24 hours a day. I had to be the perfect patient, compliant, grateful, and just disturbed enough to justify my presence without being so crazy that they'd keep me indefinitely. Meanwhile, outside the facility's tasteful walls, my real plan was moving forward. Tony called me on the secure phone I'd smuggled in, hidden inside a hollowed-out book. "It's working like a charm," he reported. "Erica filed the paperwork to take control of your assets yesterday. Fiona's been helping her navigate the legal system, and they think they've got everything locked up tight." "What about Brandon?" "He's been laying low since the charity gala, but word is he's already looking at properties in Florida, somewhere far away from his suddenly very public affair." "Perfect. How long before they realize the accounts are empty?" "Should be any day now. Your lawyer's been stalling, but he can't hold them off much longer." "Good. Make sure you're ready for Phase 5. Everything's in place. You sure you want to go through with this part? It's going to be messy." "Tony, they tried to steal my life. Messy is the point." I hung up and returned to my performance as the grateful patient. During group therapy sessions, I talked about my delusions and how grateful I was to finally understand that my wife had never been unfaithful. In individual sessions with Dr. Chen, I expressed amazement at how clear my thinking had become now that the paranoid thoughts were under control. "It's remarkable," I told her during our Thursday session. "I actually believed that Erica was planning to have me committed so she could steal my money. Can you imagine anything so ridiculous?" "Paranoid delusions often focus on the people closest to us," she agreed. "The mind creates elaborate conspiracy theories to explain feelings of anxiety or depression." I feel so guilty about the things I accused her of. Having an affair with her colleague, plotting against me. She must hate me. "I'm sure she understands that you were ill. These kinds of episodes can be very frightening for family members, but most spouses are just relieved when their loved one gets help." If only she knew. On Friday afternoon, I got the call I'd been waiting for. "Richard?" Erica's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course. The medication has really helped clear my thinking." "Where did you put the money?" "What money?" "The $12 million from the business sale. It's not in any of your accounts." I let a long pause develop, as if I was trying to remember something important. "Oh, that. I moved it." "You moved it where?" "I don't remember exactly. I was having one of my episodes, and I was convinced that someone was trying to steal it from me. So I transferred it somewhere safe." "Richard, this is very important. I need you to try to remember where you put it." "Why? Is something wrong?" Another pause, longer this time. "No, nothing's wrong. I just need to make sure all our finances are in order while you're getting treatment. That's very thoughtful of you. But honestly, Erica, I can barely remember what I had for breakfast this morning. The doctors say the medication can affect short-term memory." "Richard, please, try to remember. Did you write anything down? Keep any records?" "I might have, but if I did, they'd be at home somewhere, maybe in my office or the safe or—" I trailed off as if the effort of thinking was exhausting me. "Okay, don't worry about it right now. Just focus on getting better." "I will. And Erica, thank you for standing by me through all this. I know I put you through hell with my paranoid accusations." It's okay, Richard. You were sick. I love you. I love you too." She hung up, and I smiled. By now, she and her conspirators would be tearing my house apart looking for account numbers and passwords. They'd find nothing, of course, because there was nothing to find. The money was safely hidden in accounts they'd never locate, protected by layers of legal structures they couldn't penetrate. but they didn't know that yet. Saturday morning brought the next phase of my plan into action. I was in the facility's common room, pretending to read a magazine, when Tony arrived for visiting hours. "How you holding up in here?" he asked, sitting across from me at one of the small tables. "Better every day. The doctors say I should be ready for release soon." "That's great news. Listen, I hate to bother you with business stuff while you're recovering, but there's been some weird activity with your accounts." I looked up sharply, letting concern flash across my face. "What kind of activity?" "Someone's been trying to access your financial records. My contact at the bank called me because they knew we worked together. Apparently, your wife filed some kind of legal paperwork claiming authority over your assets. That doesn't make sense. Why would Erica need authority over my assets?" Tony leaned forward and lowered his voice. "Rich, I think someone's trying to rob you blind while you're in here." "That's impossible. Erica would never—" I stopped, letting the old paranoid thoughts creep back into my expression. "Unless— No, that's crazy thinking. The doctors said I need to stop seeing conspiracies everywhere." "This isn't a conspiracy, buddy. This is real. I've got copies of the paperwork if you want to see them." He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photocopies of all the documents Erica and Fiona had filed, the commitment proceedings, the asset transfer requests, even email printouts detailing their plan. I read through them slowly, my hands beginning to shake. This can't be real. These emails about having me committed, about taking my money, Erica wouldn't do this to me. "I'm sorry, Rich, but it looks like your paranoid thoughts weren't so paranoid after all." I stood up abruptly, knocking over my chair. The sound echoed through the common room, and several other patients looked over at us. "She's been lying to me, all this time telling me I was crazy, that I was imagining things. She's been planning to destroy me. Rich, you need to calm down." "Calm down? My wife is trying to steal everything I've worked for. She's having me locked up so she can run off with her boyfriend." Two orderlies appeared at our table. "Mr. Forrest, we need you to lower your voice. Don't you understand? I'm not crazy. There really is a conspiracy. My wife and her friend are trying to steal my money. Sir, you need to come with us." As they led me away from the visiting area, I called back to Tony. "Don't let them get away with this. Don't let them steal everything." The orderlies took me to a quiet room where Dr. Chen was waiting with a concerned expression and a syringe. "Mr. Forrest, I understand you've had some upsetting news, but we need to get you stabilized. Dr. Chen, please, you have to listen to me. My wife is trying to have me declared incompetent so she can steal my money. I have proof." "Richard, we've talked about this. These paranoid thoughts are symptoms of your condition. But I have documents, evidence. Patients in your condition often interpret normal legal documents as evidence of persecution. Your wife is simply trying to manage your affairs while you recover." The sedative hit my system like a warm wave, and I let myself relax into the chair. "But what if I wasn't crazy?" I mumbled as the drug took effect. "What if everything I thought was really happening?" "Then you'd be the victim of an incredibly elaborate conspiracy," Dr. Chen said gently. "And what are the odds of that?" As I drifted off to sleep, I smiled. Better than she thought. I was released from Willowbrook on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after I'd checked myself in. Dr. Chen was pleased with my progress and confident that the combination of medication and therapy had resolved my paranoid episodes. She scheduled weekly follow-up appointments and reminded me to take my pills regularly. If she only knew that I'd flushed every single dose down the toilet. Tony picked me up in his truck, and we drove straight to the Ledger. It was barely noon, but I needed a drink and a quiet place to make some phone calls. Janine poured me a beer without being asked, and gave me a look that said she was ready for whatever came next. "How'd it go in there?" she asked. "Better than expected. I'm officially cured of my paranoid delusions about my wife's affair and conspiracy to steal my money." And the real plan? I pulled out my phone and showed them a series of text messages from my lawyer, my accountant, and several business associates. While I'd been playing crazy in the mental health facility, they'd been busy setting up the final phase of my revenge. Everything's in place, I said. Erica and her conspirators have spent the last 2 weeks trying to access accounts that don't exist, transfer money that's already gone, and execute a plan that was doomed from the start. So what happens now? Tony asked. Now we give them exactly what they've been working so hard for. I made the first call to my lawyer. Richard, good to hear from you. Are you ready to proceed? More than ready. Execute Phase 6. Consider it done. The paperwork will be filed within the hour. The second call went to my accountant. The asset transfers are complete, he reported. Everything's exactly where you wanted it. And the documentation? Bulletproof. Even if they hire the best forensic accountants in the country, they'll never trace the money. The third call was to Patricia Hawthorne from the hospital board. Mrs. Hawthorne, this is Richard Forrest. I believe we met at the charity gala. Oh yes, Richard. I heard you were getting treatment. I hope you're feeling better. Much better, thank you. I was calling because I have some information that might interest the board. Information about certain staff members who may have been abusing their positions. What kind of information? The kind that involves falsifying medical records, conspiracy to commit fraud, and adultery between colleagues. Would you be available for a meeting this afternoon? Yes. I think that could be arranged. After I hung up, Tony and Janine were staring at me with expressions of awe and terror. You're really going to destroy them all, aren't you? Janine said. They destroyed themselves. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. My phone rang. Erica's name appeared on the screen. Hello, dear. I was just about to call you. Richard, we need to talk. Right now. Of course. I'm at the Ledger. Why don't you come down here? I'm not meeting you at some dive bar. Come home. Actually, I don't think that's our home anymore. According to the paperwork you filed while I was in the hospital, you've taken legal control of all our assets. That would include the house. Silence. Richard, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that my paranoid delusions turned out to be completely accurate. You really were having an affair with Dr. Cates. You really were planning to have me committed, and you really were trying to steal my money. You're having another episode. No, Erica. I'm having a moment of perfect clarity. For the first time in months, I can see everything exactly as it is. Richard, please come home so we can discuss this rationally. I am being rational. In fact, I'm being more rational than I've ever been in my life. Which is why I'm calling to let you know that at 3 o'clock this afternoon, I'll be meeting with the hospital board to discuss your conduct and that of Dr. Cates. You can't do that. Actually, I can, and I will. And Erica, you might want to call Fiona and let her know that her involvement in your little conspiracy has been thoroughly documented. I hung up and turned to Tony and Janine. Phase 7 begins now. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and carefully orchestrated revelations. By the time I walked into the hospital board meeting at 3 o'clock, half the city knew that Dr. Brandon Cates was having an affair with a married woman whose husband he'd helped commit to a mental institution. The boardroom was packed with hospital administrators, legal representatives, and several people I didn't recognize but who looked like they dealt with public relations disasters for a living. Patricia Hawthorne called the meeting to order and introduced me as Mr. Richard Forrest, who has some serious allegations to present. I stood up and smiled at the assembled group. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 weeks ago I voluntarily committed myself to a mental health facility because I believed I was suffering from paranoid delusions. I thought my wife was having an affair with Dr. Brandon Cates. I thought they were conspiring with hospital administrator Fiona Walsh to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could steal my assets and disappear together. Murmurs rippled through the room. It turns out I wasn't delusional at all. I was completely correct. I opened my briefcase and began distributing copies of the evidence I'd gathered: emails, text messages, financial documents, and photographs that painted a complete picture of the conspiracy. What you're looking at is a detailed plan to commit fraud, falsify medical records, and abuse the mental health system for personal gain. Dr. Cates used his position and medical credentials to support false claims about my mental state. Ms. Walsh used her administrative access to facilitate the conspiracy, and my wife orchestrated the entire scheme. The room erupted in whispered conversations. I could see several board members frantically reading through the documents, their faces growing more shocked with each page. The irony, I continued, is that their plan actually worked perfectly. I was committed, they gained legal control of my assets, and they were free to proceed with their relationship. There was just one small problem. I paused for dramatic effect. They forgot to check whether the assets they were stealing actually existed. More murmurs. These ones confused rather than shocked. You see, while they were busy plotting my downfall, I was busy protecting myself. The $12 million from my business sale was transferred to protected trusts months ago. The real estate they thought they were claiming has been restructured through corporate entities they can't touch. The bank accounts they've been trying to access contain exactly enough money to cover the legal fees for the lawsuits I'll be filing against all three of them. The confusion turned to stunned silence. In other words, they committed multiple felonies, destroyed their careers, and ruined their reputations to steal money that was never there in the first place. Patricia Hawthorne was the first to find her voice. Mr. Forrest, these are very serious allegations. Do you have proof of everything you're claiming? I smiled and pulled out one final document. I have something better than proof. I have a confession. The document was a signed statement from Fiona Walsh, obtained by my lawyer just an hour earlier. Faced with the evidence of her involvement and the prospect of criminal charges, she'd decided to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Her statement detailed the entire conspiracy, including dates, times, and specific conversations about the plan to have me committed. It implicated both Erica and Brandon as the primary architects of the scheme and provided enough evidence to destroy both their careers and their freedom. Ms. Walsh will be testifying before a grand jury next week, I said. Dr. Cates and my wife will be receiving criminal indictments shortly thereafter. The boardroom was completely silent now. I could see people frantically taking notes, probably already planning how to minimize the damage to the hospital's reputation. I want to thank you all for your time, I said, closing my briefcase. I'm sure you have a lot to discuss. As I walked toward the door, Patricia Hawthorne called after me. Mr. Forrest, what do you want from us? What would constitute a satisfactory resolution to this situation? I turned back to face the room full of shocked administrators and smiled. I don't want anything from you. This was never about money or revenge. This was about justice. Then why are you here? Why bring this to us instead of just going to the police? Because, I said, I wanted to make sure that everyone who needs to know the truth gets to hear it directly from me. The police reports and criminal charges will be filed tomorrow. The civil lawsuits will follow next week. But today, I wanted you all to understand exactly what kind of people you've been employing. I walked out of the boardroom and into the hospital corridor where Erica was waiting for me. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past 2 weeks. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, and her eyes held the kind of desperation that comes with watching your entire world collapse. Richard, please, we need to talk. No, we don't. We needed to talk 15 years ago when you first started lying to me. We needed to talk 6 months ago when you started your affair. We needed to talk 2 weeks ago when you had me committed. Now it's too late for talking. I can explain everything. You don't need to explain anything. Fiona already did that for you. The look of betrayal that crossed her face was almost satisfying enough to make up for 15 years of marriage. She told you everything? Everything. The affair, the conspiracy, the the plan to steal my money, even the part about how you were going to disappear to Florida with Brandon once I was safely locked away. Erica sank into one of the corridor chairs, her face in her hands. What happens now? She whispered. Now you face the consequences of your choices, just like everyone else. Richard, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I am truly sorry. Sorry that you got caught, or sorry that you tried to destroy me? She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Sorry that I became someone I don't recognize. Sorry that I hurt you. Sorry that I threw away 15 years of marriage for a fantasy that was never going to work. The fantasy might have worked if you hadn't been so greedy. If you just asked for a divorce, you could have walked away with half of everything, but you wanted it all, and you wanted me destroyed in the process. I was afraid you'd fight the divorce, that you'd try to hide assets or make things difficult. So instead, you decided to have me declared insane and steal everything while I was locked in a mental hospital? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Goodbye, Erica. I'll see you in court. As I walked away, I could hear her crying behind me, but I didn't turn around. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. I drove back to the Ledger, where Tony and Janine were waiting with drinks and expectant faces. How'd it go? Tony asked. Better than I could have hoped. By tomorrow morning, the whole city will know what they tried to do. By next week, they'll be facing criminal charges. And by next month, they'll be dealing with civil lawsuits that will keep them in court for years. And you? Janine asked. What happens to you now? I raised my beer and smiled. Now I get to start over. New life, new city, new everything. Turns out $12 million buys you a lot of fresh starts. You're leaving? This place holds too many bad memories. Time to find somewhere that doesn't. We drank in comfortable silence for a while, watching the afternoon sun stream through the bar's dirty windows. Outside, life was going on as normal. People heading home from work, kids walking home from school, couples making dinner plans. But for 3 people in this city, life would never be normal again. They'd gambled everything on a scheme to destroy me, and they'd lost more than they'd ever imagined possible. My phone buzzed with a text message from my lawyer. Criminal charges filed, civil suits ready to go, justice served. I deleted the message and finished my beer. Justice served indeed.